This video is by Straight Goods News. SGNews.ca.
Well, the first thing that's absolutely amazing is, of course, that the minister said that it's not true that under the current program it was possible to have companies pay 15% less to temporary foreign workers than they were paying to Canadian workers, and yet 2 hours later he reversed himself and announced the change, that would now no longer be possible. So clearly we were right all along when we suggested that this was one of the serious flaws in the program. He announced yesterday that there would be some changes. Again, the wage change was one, of course. He also said that they would get more serious about being able to revoke labor market opinions. But to me, that's acting once the horses have left the barn. The reality is, unless this government gets serious about investigating and enforcing, none of the changes that were announced yesterday will make any difference. What the government needs to do is get serious about creating jobs in Canada and protecting jobs for Canadians, and that hasn't been happening under the way this government has administered the Temporary Foreign Workers Program.
Have some of the cuts that they put in place make it harder for those kinds of checks and balances to go about?
Well, of course. I mean, as you know, all of the investigation would be done by federal public servants. You know that they have cut those jobs in record numbers. I think the layoffs are now up to 19,000. So yes, of course, enforcement is falling by the wayside. But it is also the structure of the program. The government introduced accelerated labor market opinions. We know from the Alberta Federation of Labor that those accelerated labor market opinions led to floods of temporary foreign workers coming in without there actually ever having been done any serious recruitment of Canadian workers first. Those kinds of checks and balances need to be in place. That we're going to need to increase the labour force in Canada down the road. The only way to do that in a sustainable way is through increasing immigration and making it possible for people to bring their families to Canada if we want to create long-term growth. This government obviously isn't interested in that at all. What they're looking for is cheap labour, and that's what we're seeing reflected in these changes. You should also know, though, that right now there are 1.4 million unemployed Canadians. So when the government says that there's a labour shortage in Canada, that is currently not the case. We have 6 unemployed Canadians for every 1 job vacancy in this country. So what this government needs to do is a much better job at actually matching skill sets in one region to vacancies in the other. They have to invest in labour mobility. They have to invest in skills training and help Canadians access the jobs that do exist. What we're finding is that the government has helter-skelter adopted the business agenda of trying to bring in cheap labour wherever possible. That ought not to be our national priority. And when I get asked about, so what does it take to fill jobs with Canadians when some of those jobs Canadians aren't interested in, the reality is perhaps we should look at the wage structure, or perhaps we should look at actually training Canadians for those jobs and investing in apprenticeship programs and skills upgrading, or maybe we need to invest in helping people to access jobs through labour mobility initiatives like My Bill C-201. All of those things would facilitate Canadians accepting. It's a bill that I've had on the order paper for 3 parliaments now. I am hopeful that I'm going to be moving forward with it because I'm in the next round of private members' bills that's coming up. It's a bill that would create tax credits for travel and accommodation for people who work in the building and construction trades. Because as you know, somebody who's, for example, building a hospital, once the hospital is built, that job is finished. So what my bill would do is allow somebody, say from New Brunswick, to come to Ontario, help in the construction of a hospital if there's a skills shortage in that particular part of Ontario, but they wouldn't have to give up their home. When that job is done, they can travel back home and be reunited with their family.